Imagine walking alongside a quiet beach at sunrise. The waves are calm and the world's half asleep. But then you see him, a man sitting neatly against the seawall, shoes polished, dressed like he's heading to a dinner party, except for one thing: he's not breathing. This is how one of the strangest unsolved cases in history began, with no name and no ID and no cause of death, and just one haunting clue tucked into his pocket. Just a single scrap of paper that read, Tamám Shud. Translation: it is finished. But trust me, this mystery was anything but finished. Welcome to Supernatural Signals, where the screen meets the spirits. Today we're tuning into one of Australia's strangest cases, the man who died with no name. On December 1st, 1948, in Somerton Beach, Adelaide, Australia, our story begins. After a couple who were walking on the beach discovered the man and reported it to the police, the units arrived to find this mysterious man perfectly dressed but completely lifeless. His body showed no signs of violence. His fingerprints matched no one. And here's the kicker: every single label in his clothing had been cut out. Someone wanted this man to have no identity. It's like he was meant to disappear, quietly, neatly, intentionally. And the autopsy simply just brought more questions, because nothing was found to be conclusive. Some suspected poison, but no trace of any was ever found. He was buried under a tombstone that read simply, "Here lies the unknown man, found at Somerton Beach." And that should have been the end, until the strangest clue surfaced. It wasn't until months later when a hidden pocket in his pants was discovered. It was like a secret sewn inside his clothes. And inside it, a tiny rolled up scrap of paper with the words, Tamám Shud. It's Persian, and it comes from a centuries old book of poetry called The Rubaiyat of Omar Khayyam, a book that reflects on fate, love, and death. Basically, the kind of poetry you don't want showing up in your murder mystery. Police searched for a copy of that book, and incredibly, someone turned one in, found in a car parked near the beach. The torn page matched perfectly, and in the back of the book, a strange code of letters that looked like a code. Oh, and a phone number. The number led the police to a woman who lived nearby. She was a nurse known only as Justine, later identified as Jessica Thompson. When detectives showed up at her door, she claimed she had no idea who the man was. But when they showed her a photo of his face, she nearly fainted, and she refused to talk about it ever again. And for me, that's where this case shifts from tragic to something else. The code in the back of the book has never been cracked. Not by the police, not by military, cryptographers, not even by modern code breakers. Some say it was a spy cipher. Others think it was a personal message, written in a language only two people could understand. Now, for decades, the Somerton Man remained a ghost story with paperwork until 2022, when DNA testing finally identified him as Carl, or Charles, Webb, an electrical engineer from Melbourne. But instead of ending the mystery, it deepened it, because more questions arose. For instance, why was he in Adelaide? Why was there no record of how he died? And why did Jessica Thompson's family DNA show connections that hinted at something more? Perhaps even a secret relationship. So, yeah, maybe this wasn't a random death. Maybe it was the end of a love story or a secret mission that someone wanted erased. All right, so let's go into a little bit more details of this case before we get into my own thoughts and theories and close this out. Okay, so the first detail I want to go into, or concept that I want to go into, is more about this Charles Webb theory. And when I say theory, I mean it. Because although the DNA evidence that we do have supports that Charles is the missing man, we can't 100% prove it. Because the reality is, we don't have a direct comparison. So, to say we don't have an old toothbrush or a hairbrush or a mouth swab from Webb or a preserved blood sample to compare one to one. The idea is based on genealogical matching to cousins and relatives, not DNA versus his own known DNA. So, what we do know is that DNA from the exhumed body in 2021 was used to build a genetic profile and compare it to living relatives using forensic genealogy. And then they used that DNA work, and that showed strong matches to relatives of Carl Charles Webb's, a man born in 1905 in Melbourne, and like I said before, who was an electrical engineer and instrument maker. Now, my question that comes from all this is, why didn't the family of Charles Webb report him missing? I did look into it and I couldn't even find pictures of Charles Webb on the internet. Family members, sure, but no up to date pictures of Carl or Charles. There is a couple of him when he was younger with his family members that is displayed here, but nothing that is up to date of when they actually found the body. Now, let's get into a little bit of his backstory to kind of have a better picture of as to maybe why his relatives weren't looking for him. Because by the late 1940s, he was estranged from his wife and described as a loner and had already walked out of his old life. In that context, his family may have simply assumed he left for good rather than seeing him as missing. But despite all that, I still find the situation strange because even after decades that Charles Webb had disappeared, no one really went searching for him. And I get it. He was a loner. Maybe people thought he just wanted to be left alone, especially after his marriage. But with the story eventually making headlines worldwide, you'd think someone, somewhere, would have worried and come forward. It just feels so odd that it took modern DNA work for anyone to finally piece it together. And again, it doesn't seem like the family really cares too much. Okay, with all that being said, let's get into some more additional details about this case. A few days after the man's body was found, they did discover an unclaimed suitcase at the Adelaide Railroad Station. It had been checked in the day before he died, and inside were clothes that matched his size and style. But again, every clothing label had been cut out. The only clue was the name T. Keane, Keane, written faintly on one item. But there was no missing person by that name. Even the suitcase itself had its manufacturer's label torn off. Whoever this man was, someone went to extreme lengths to erase his identity, or maybe he did. Then came another strange detail. Witnesses reported seeing him on the beach that night before he was found. Supposedly, he was lying in the same spot, motionless, and people assumed he was drunk or asleep. But one woman remembered something odd. She said he moved his arms slightly as if taking a final breath, meaning he may have been dying in plain sight and no one even realized it. Even the book, The Rubaiyat, adds to the puzzle. The car it was found in, Its owner said it appeared mysteriously on his back seat with no idea who left it there. And the code scribbled inside, lines of random letters, seemed like gibberish. But some analysts think it wasn't random at all. It might have been the first letters of words, a private poem, initials of names, or even a military cipher. Add that to the post war timing, 1948, right in the middle of the Cold War spy activity, and you've got a case that looks less like a random death and more like a message that was never meant to be decoded. And then, of course, there's Jessica, the nurse. I don't think she was innocent in all this. Maybe not guilty of a crime, but she definitely knew more than what she said. The way she reacted, refusing to even look at him, to me, that wasn't fear, that was guilt. And sometimes guilt doesn't scream, it hides. People ignore what they feel guilty about, but in doing that, they keep breathing life into it. Maybe she carried the weight for the rest of her life, knowing something the world wasn't meant to uncover. And if there's one thing I take away from this case, it's how important it is to match the right clues to the right questions. Because with mysteries like this, we can chase hundreds of theories, but if we're asking the wrong things, we'll never see the truth that's been sitting quietly in front of us the whole time. Now, if we want to step fully into the supernatural lane for a minute before closing this out, if this just wasn't a human tragedy or a Cold War spy game, I'll be honest, I'm leaning toward an alien experiment or experience over traditional ghost or demon story. The pieces fit almost too neatly for that kind of scenario. A man with very few close connections, someone whose family or social circle wasn't strong enough to immediately raise alarms, a body left in a calm, almost staged position, and a code that no one had been able to decipher. If you were something or someone choosing a test subject, you would go for someone quieter, more isolated, someone the world wouldn't come searching for right away. And if that someone got caught up in something they couldn't quite explain, something beyond human rules, who would they turn to? Maybe a nurse, someone kind, someone used to seeing people at their most vulnerable. So I can absolutely imagine him coming back from whatever happened and confiding in Jessica, telling her just enough to terrify her that no one would believe him, that something had been done to him, that he was being watched, or that it was finished and there was no going back. And of course, she felt overwhelmed and afraid for herself or her family and just shut down. Not evil, just scared. And then we're going to go into one more thing, and that's the code. Most people look at it and think spy writing, secret lover note, or random letters. But when you really stare at it, especially that X that shows up, you can't help but wonder, what if it wasn't just a message? What if it was location? We use X's to mark places on maps, treasure spots, coordinates, and even now in digital maps or drawings. It's a small, simple symbol, but it's powerful. X marks the spot. So I find myself wondering if this code wasn't meant to read like a sentence at all. What if it was a fragmented way of recording something? A meeting point, a landing site, a route, a rendezvous that only meant something to him and whoever or whatever he was involved with. If this was an alien experience or some kind of unworthy contact, the code might not be meant for us to decode. It might have been coordinates locked to a place, a time, or a moment that already passed. And once his role in it was finished, so was he. Alrighty, so we may never know what truly happened to the Somerton Man. But in a way, his last message, "it is finished," pushes us to do the opposite, to keep questioning, keep learning how to read the signs, and keep getting better at matching the right clues to the right mysteries. Because some stories might be finished for the person living them, but for the rest of us, they're just getting started. Alrighty. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give me a like, comment, and subscribe. And other than that, stay curious and stay tuned into the supernatural. Thanks for watching.